Hey guys! Welcome back to another Last Week I Watched. I'm just going to talk about everything last week that I watched, hence the name Last Week I Watched. Why did I need to say that? Alright, let's just jump into it. Everything Everywhere All at Once. This is the latest A24 movie, but it's quite the departure for A24. Usually they're known for very slow-moving horror movies, and this is a fast-paced action blockbuster type movie. It feels like a blockbuster, but it only cost around $25 million to make. This movie was directed by a team of directors that go by the Daniels. I don't know their last names, I just know them as the Daniels, but they previously directed the movie Swiss Army Man with Daniel Radcliffe. And I thought Swiss Army Man was a really clever movie because on its surface it was very indie movie-y, but it kind of felt like it was making fun of indie movies. The presentation of it was like an indie movie, but the movie opens with a corpse farting. So anyway, I went to see this movie, I had high hopes for it, and yeah, those hopes were exceeded actually. I really enjoyed this movie. This movie is basically about this Chinese family that runs a laundromat. The lead character here is Michelle Yeoh. Her marriage is a little rocky. She's about to get a divorce. She's not really bonding with her daughter all that well. Her daughter's going through a teenage phase, plus the daughter is a lesbian, and she doesn't know how to communicate that to her father, who's more traditional. Anyway, they go to the IRS because of some tax evasion thing, and all of a sudden, Michelle Yeoh discovers that she is basically the last hope in protecting the multiverse. There are multiple dimensions out there, she discovers, and some force is trying to fuck with the multiverse, and this person is the last person standing who can defeat her. This is basically a martial arts movie mixed with some elements of superhero movies. There's a lot going on in this movie. It really feels very wacky. This is a very wacky movie, but through that wackiness, there's actually a lot of emotion. Yes, there's a lot of random shit going on, but it never just feels like random for the sake of randomness. It does sometimes, but it's for comedy, but at other times it really feels like there's a good emotional story going on in here, which is all you want in a blockbuster movie. I was thoroughly entertained the whole movie. The martial arts in this is fantastic. The action is fantastic. The laughs are solid. My theater was laughing pretty hard at this movie. Some of the visual gags in here are hilarious. One involving a butt plug, another involving like sausage fingers. I don't want to spoil the movie too much. It's just a very visually wacky movie. I just couldn't take my eyes off the screen. There was a point where I had to remind myself to blink. This has never happened to me. I had to remind myself to blink because there was so much on screen going on, so much stimulus. I had to like take a moment and close my eyes, and a couple of tears fell out. Like I said, it's actually a very emotional story. It's about a mom who can't really get along with her daughter, has very similar themes to any other Asian American movie out there right now, Turning Red or Crazy Rich Asians. It's always about the Asian tiger mom who's really hard up on parenting and the daughter is more progressive and yada yada yada. That's the part that I wasn't too impressed with the movie about. It felt like a very cliched story at this point when you see a Asian family on film. Not that I have like a problem with them exploring that story. I don't think it's inherently bad to explore that story. It's just at this point I'm a little sick of it. It's been overdone. But also this movie has a really nice theme of being a little fish in this greater ocean, being a little piece of this billion-piece puzzle. And how do you cope with knowing that knowledge? Do you become very cynical in your approach, or do you embrace the absurdity of being just a small piece of a billion-piece puzzle? I feel like that's what the movie was about. You had the antagonist who was very cynical and like, I know so much about the multiverse, I just don't care at this point. But meanwhile, you had Michelle Yeoh, who knew so much about the multiverse that she actually used that for good. And despite the presentation being so wacky and in your face and very confusing in its editing, it still follows the beats of a blockbuster. It follows Joseph Campbell's hero's journey basically to a T, is what I've noticed. You had Michelle Yeoh, ordinary environment. You had the call to adventure. The multiverse ends up being like the unknown. The mentor becomes her husband, well, her possessed husband. So it really follows that perfect blockbuster structure to a T. That's why to me this feels more like A24's take on a blockbuster, and having those weird A24 quirks fit into the genre of blockbusters. I thought this was a really interesting movie. A lot of heart went into this one, just like Swiss Army Man. The Daniels are those directors that no matter what they're making, I'm gonna be interested in it. They're like probably one of the cooler filmmakers working right now. I'm gonna talk about some spoilers, so if you want to avoid spoilers, skip to the next movie and the timestamps in the description. But anyway, some hard laughs I had in this movie. The end credits rolling early, everyone got fooled by that in my theater. I didn't. I knew it was gonna happen, but a lot of people in my theater were just like, what? The part I laughed the hardest at is Jenny Slate using her fucking dog as a weapon. She's just slinging her dog around, and then Michelle Yeoh's character has like a vision of her as a hibachi chef, which was a really cool component to that movie. I liked the fact that Michelle Yeoh had to channel her different multiverse variations in order to gain their skill. I thought that made for some really interesting character development. But anyway, she gets like a vision of her as a hibachi chef, and I thought for a second she was gonna cook the dog. I was convinced she would cook the dog. I was like, no way is this movie gonna go that far. They didn't, but still, this movie goes bonkers. The butt plug scene. Dude, there's a scene where someone's kung fu fighting naked and lands on a butt plug. That's fucking amazing. This movie is so bonkers. Every scene with the two rocks, I was dying of laughter. I was like, how is this in the fucking movie? Like in some multiverse, they're just rocks. And it actually gets pretty emotional too, like one rock is chasing after the other rock, and one rock's got the googly eyes on. That's what I mean, a lot of heart, and even when it's something absurd, like the raccoon on top of the guy's head, controlling him like Ratatouille, every kind of variation had a lot of heart to it. It was like each little segment was like a Swiss Army Man. It had a very absurd premise to it, but had a lot of heart buried underneath, and I can say that about each variation of the story going on in this movie. Overall, love this movie. Can't praise it enough. Certified dank. Go watch it. Please go watch it. This is definitely worth your time. I wouldn't recommend it to like your average schmo who just likes like maybe a Marvel movie. It's definitely a lot weirder than that. It's really quirky and in your face. I was entertained the whole time and I was never bored. I never like wanted to check the time at any point in this movie. I was locked in solid into this movie. Oh yeah, I didn't talk about the cast for the movie. Really strange cast. So you have Michelle Yeoh, who's a phenomenal actress, but then you have Short Round, who I forget his name, but Short Round from Indiana Jones retired from acting and then just came back, and I thought his voice was a little weird, but then turns out he's actually Vietnamese and he's speaking Chinese in the movie, so that's why. So I thought that was interesting, like now that I know that. The great James Hong is in this movie. How old is... James Hong is 93 years old. The one thing I drew from watching this movie, I don't understand how Doctor Strange 2 can possibly top this. It has a very similar plot to what I expect Doctor Strange 2's plot is going to be. You can throw cameos at me, you can throw Professor X, or Bruce Campbell is probably going to appear in the movie, or you can throw whatever Marvel character at me, fucking Nicolas Cage as Ghost Rider. But I don't think anything will top the craziness and wackiness of this movie. So, the next movie I watched, yeah, I spent a lot of time on that one because I liked it a lot. The other movie I watched is Inland Empire. This movie is a David Lynch movie. I'm doing a David Lynch video, and I wanted to catch up on his filmography, and Inland Empire is the only movie of his I've never seen. Inland Empire is a David Lynch movie, so you know what you're getting into. And it's about this actress who is slowly becoming the character she's performing and can't notice the difference anymore. This is a 3-hour movie. The first thing you'll notice about this movie is that it's very low fidelity, very cheap looking. It was shot on mini DV cameras, which for those of you who are too young, it's like those mini cassettes that you would put in the camera. So it's like you're shooting on film, but it's also digital at the same time. Has a very unique look. It's the same camera that they used to film the Jackass TV show. It has that very handycam look to it. And that's gonna scare off some people. And it didn't scare me off because, personal anecdote, I guess, I grew up making short films, like those backyard short films you make when you're a teenager and when you're a kid. The camera I had was that very camera that David Lynch is using in Inland Empire. So I have a bit of a nostalgia sting for that camera and that look.
Teams are allowed to put batteries and motors in a piece to make sure the energy doesn't decrease.
Terrible short films, by the way. Those are never getting released to you guys. That's never the kind of content I'm putting on Garage Movie Club. So yeah, I kind of like that look. It has a very low fidelity look, but also it makes it feel very more dreamlike, very more surreal. It really feels like these characters are being watched throughout the entirety of the movie. Kind of has a kind of found footagey feel to it. It kind of feels like you're watching these characters. And that especially comes into play. There's one scene in here where Laura Dern is doing a run-through of her performance, and she feels like she's being watched. And then later on in the film, you discover that she is the one watching herself. It was a really crazy, kind of eerie scene, and I like that. I feel like that camera kind of contributed to that emotion. Other than that, do I like this movie? Yes. I think this is a decently made film. Do I understand it? No. Every David Lynch movie I watch, the first time I watch it, I'm kind of on the fence about it. Then the second time I watch it, I kind of pick up on a few more things. And there's some movies like Eraserhead that I feel like I grasp more quickly. I'm like, oh, I get it. Then there's other movies like Mulholland Drive that I kind of just don't get. Every time I try watching Mulholland Drive, I just don't get it, but I understand just a tiny incy bit more. And I think after the 25th time I watch Mulholland Drive, I'll finally get it. And this is more into that Mulholland Drive category. So it's not top tier Lynch for me. I love, obviously, The Elephant Man and Straight Story, but when it comes to his more abstract stuff, I think Eraserhead is his best movie. Yeah, but this is still very welcome. I really enjoyed watching this movie. Not top shelf David Lynch. There are some moments that kind of dragged on, and you feel like, okay, let's get with it. The character delivery, how they delivered the dialogue, was a little off sometimes. I'd be like, okay, let's like go through these lines. It kind of added to that dreamy feel. So I'm a little on the fence about it. What I'm getting at is that this is a well done movie, but 3 hours is a long time to be like, what the fuck is going on? So yeah, if you're not a David Lynch fan, don't expect this movie to win you over. It's very bizarre, very weird. A good sense of humor, like every other David Lynch movie. Despite his movies being really weird, they really do have a good sense of humor to them. Inland Empire, an interesting movie. A very big head scratcher. I'm sure there's tons of subreddits dedicated to dissecting this movie. I don't like doing that usually. I like coming up with my own interpretation. I don't like people influencing it. But yeah, I'm going to give it another shot at some point. But I enjoyed it on my first watch. My rating will probably increase on a second viewing. Finally, I watched a batshit fucking crazy movie. It's called Tetsuo the Iron Man. Has nothing to do with Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man. Not that Iron Man. This is a cyberpunk body horror Japanese film that came out in like the late 80s. All shot in black and white. Very industrial feel. And it's just a batshit crazy movie. I found out about this movie through a film critic called Mark Kermode on BBC. He did a video on this movie and it kind of piqued my interest. And it kind of looked like body horror, and I like body horror. So I decided to give this a watch. Wowee, was this like an acid trip. It legit felt like an acid trip. Very short movie, about an hour and a half, I would say. But a very, very well done movie. Again, it's a very abstract movie, much like Inland Empire. But I feel like this time I was able to grasp a bit more what was going on. The story is present. It's not just batshit crazy visuals, but it's not really told to you. You kind of have to like dig a little deeper. The body horror in this is crazy. It's a very vile, disgusting movie. It's very hard to watch. Basically, the premise of this movie is that I hesitate to call it a virus, but let's call it a virus. There's kind of this virus going on, and it's making people more and more machine and less man. And at a certain point, it starts to affect the protagonist of this to the point where he wants to become more machine than man. I feel like the movie was ultimately about how we're becoming over-reliant on technology. That's just the overall theme I drew from this film. You have a man that's literally becoming machine. Every component of his life is becoming machine. He's becoming obsessed with the machine. As a matter of fact, one of the characters in this movie in the credits is credited as machine fetishist, which is quite a... It's a word. It's a good word for it. Yeah, just some batshit moments in this. There's like a scene where a girl has like a freaking robotic strap on and she's butt fucking a guy. I'm not making this shit up, man. That actually happens in the movie. I'm not making it up. The stop motion in this is really good. There's some really good stop motion effects in here. The music is really good, has that very industrialized feel to it, and just the genre blending that's going on in this movie. It's an abstract film mixed with a cyberpunk film, mixed with body horror a la Cronenberg, and some elements of even anime. There's 2 sequels to the movie, and apparently they're grosser than the original. But guys, this is a crazy horror movie. If you like Japanese horror movies, watch Tetsuo the Iron Man. You won't regret it. Much like Everything Everywhere All at Once, it's a crazy movie, but I was hooked and I never checked the time. I was just in it. Definitely one of the best horror movies I've seen in quite a while. Alright guys, so you got 2 certified dank movies in this bunch of last week I watched. Stay tuned, guys. I have something really good prepared on David Lynch. It's going to be up on my channel in this week, hopefully. And I'm planning to do another video that I think will be quite interesting. So guys, stay tuned, and I hope to see you around. Tell me in the comments below, what have you watched last week?